Hello and welcome to my new series called Make Games Using the Odin Programming Language and Raylib. The target audience for this series is people who have little to no programming experience, but it will help a lot if you're a bit technical and if you're interested in games. Also, if you have been programming before, but you have never done any video games programming, then I still think you will find this very interesting. This video has a companion blog post that I will link to in the description, and it pretty much says the same stuff as this video but in text form. So throughout this series we will make a small 2D game with simple platforming mechanics, and when you are done with the series you can extend that game, or you can take the knowledge you've learned and make more complicated games. In this video I will be working on Windows, but I will try to say what to do for Mac and Linux, but if it's too complicated to show on the screen, then I will refer you to my blog post where I have Windows, Mac and Linux instructions. So what we will do here today is the stuff on the right here in the outline. We will start with talking a bit about what Odin and Raylib is, and then we will download and set up the Odin compiler and some additional software, and then we will write our first Odin code, and I will tell you what all the code means. And then we'll compile and run the code, run our first little game, and then I have some extra stuff at the end. So what is the Odin programming language? Odin is a modern alternative to C. It's a very simple language, which makes it a good fit, I think, for beginners. It's also what's usually called a low-level language, which means that you have lots of control. And having lots of control is good when making video games, because video games need to do a lot of things very quickly. You know, they have to run at 60 frames per second or something. And then you don't want any lag or anything in your game. So a way to ensure that you don't have that is to have total control of what the game is doing. The opposite of the term low level is high level, which means that you have more stuff done automatically for you, but less control. If you come from a high-level language such as JavaScript, C# or Python, then don't be scared by all this low-levelness and all this talk of control. Because Odin is, as I usually say, low-level with a high-level feeling. Yes, you have lots of control, but there are also lots of comfortable, modern features that help you write expressive code. All this while keeping the language fairly simple. So, what is Raylib then? Raylib is a library, which means a collection of code that makes it possible for you to draw graphics, open windows, process input from gamepads, keyboards and mice, and also output sound. On the left side here I have the project showcase from the Raylib YouTube channel running. And Raylib was actually created to teach video game programming, which makes it a perfect fit for making your first video game. You should also note that Raylib is actually not a game engine. What we will do here is we will write Odin code that uses the library functionality of Raylib and then output an executable game that you can run. There is no big game engine editor, big software stuff involved in this. Just some Odin code that uses Raylib that makes an exe. Also, Odin comes with Raylib support built in, so you do not need to download anything extra after we've gotten Odin properly set up. Then you might ask, but can you make proper games with Odin and Raylib, and maybe even games that you could sell or something? And to that I can only say yes, because I have made this game called Cat and Onion using Odin and Raylib, and there's links in the description of this video if you want to check that game out. Okay, so that's enough about what Odin and Raylib is. Let's now download and set up the Odin compiler. And like I said, these instructions will be for Windows only, but in the blog post you will find Mac and Linux specific instructions. Now, we will go to odinlang.org and go to the download thingy here, and then we will click download the latest release. There are other instructions here for how to set this up on Windows, but I will show you some simplified instructions. And we'll go to the bottom here and find the Odin Windows blah 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 .zip. So, a compiler is essentially something that takes your code and outputs an exe that you can run. That's what the Odin compiler does. It takes your Odin code and turns it into a program. So when we've downloaded this zip, we will open it and it will look something like this. If you use the Windows built-in zip utility, this will look a bit different, but not too different, I hope. And then we will open the Windows File Explorer, and I will go to this PC, go to C:, and then I will make a folder here called Odin. And then I will go inside that folder, and I will take the stuff, all the stuff in the Odin compiler zip, and drag and drop it into there. So when you're done, you should have something in C::Odin that looks like this. Now, the Odin compiler, in order to run on Windows, needs some additional software. The official instructions will tell you to download the very big Visual Studio Code editor, but you actually only need a small part of that editor. So I will show you a simpler way that doesn't install as much stuff on your computer. So let's bring out the web browser here again. And now we will Google portable build tools. And we will find a GitHub page like this one. And this program just downloads, what it will do for us when we run it, it will download the Visual Studio C compiler and the Windows SDK, which is stuff that the Odin compiler in turn needs to have present in order to run properly on Windows. So we download the latest release, wait a bit and click that. Now you might get a warning like this because this portable build tools is not created by a certified Windows app developer, but it's a perfectly safe program used by many Odin developers. So click more info and then run anyway. Then we can close this. Now this program might look a bit funny because it doesn't support I have very high scaling setting on my monitor, so it looks a bit funny. But essentially what it says there is that it will install some MSVC version and some Windows SDK version. You don't need to know what all of that is, just the defaults are fine. But what you need to do is click add to environment here, because otherwise the Odin compiler won't find the stuff that is installed. And then you click accept the license agreement. This is a license agreement from Microsoft because it's their compiler and stuff we're installing. And then you click install. And then you wait for a while. Now, when Portable Build Tools has finished installing the software, it will probably tell you to log out and back in again. In that case, you should do that, otherwise the Odin compiler will not find the stuff that this thing installed. So I'm gonna do that now. Okay, so now I have logged out and logged back in, and since we have unzipped the Odin compiler and installed that additional software, then we now have a working Odin compiler. Now, the last thing before we can write some code is that we need a text editor to actually write the code in. And I recommend that you use Sublime Text. You can go to Google Sublime Text and get to this page, and then you can download it for Windows, Mac or Linux. When you have downloaded it and started it, it will look something like this, because I've been using Sublime Text all this time to show this outline on the side. But we will write our code in the left-hand side here, which should look similar to what your Sublime looks like. So let's start writing some Odin code then. Now, all Odin files needs to start with a package definition. So I write package game here. I will explain what this line does later. It's not so important right now. And then I've said that we want to use Raylib. So to make our program use Raylib, we will write import rl vendor Raylib like this. And this tells the Odin compiler to please pull in the support for Raylib, and it will put all those Raylib things under the name RL. You will see this RL appearing very soon in the code we're about to write. Now, all computer programs need to know where to start the program from, like what's the first line of code that the program will run. And in order to do that, we have something called the main procedure. And we create the main procedure by writing main : proc, with two parentheses like that, and then some curly braces. So, main is in this case a procedure, or a proc as it's shortened in Odin. And a proc is essentially a block of code, and by block of code I mean all the things between this curly brace and this curly brace. Currently there's nothing there, but soon there will be. And you attach a name to a proc like this, main, and then you can later use that name to run that proc. But in this case, main is this special proc that the computer is looking for when it wants to start your program. So in here, whatever we write here is the first line of code that our game will run. And a game usually the first thing it needs to do is open a window so you can show something to the player. So we'll do that. We will write RL, and here comes that RL from up here, rl.init window. This means that we want to create a new window, and then we need to tell it how big window. So we say 1280 by 720, classic to 720p resolution. And then we need to give this window a name. That's the little title on top of the window, just like Sublime Text has a title here. So we write my first game. So that's the line for opening a window. Now, video games are essentially a series of very quickly updating images. We call these images frames. And during a frame, the video game will draw graphics, but it will also check for user input, button presses and stuff. Maybe it will play some sound, who knows, whatever you want it to do. Now, these frames need to happen continuously in sort of a loop until the game ends. So, in order to get that loop happen, we will actually make a loop in the code. So, in order to make a loop in Odin, we write for, and then we will write the condition for this loop to continuously run. And in this case, we write rl.window should close. Some parentheses and some curly braces. So this says that we want a loop, and this is the condition for the loop to continue running. And for each lap of the loop, it will run the code between this curly brace and this curly brace over and over until this condition is no longer true. Now this condition is window should close. We're asking Raylib essentially we're asking Raylib, did the user click the little close button in the corner of the window? And in that case, we should close. But we actually want to know the opposite of that. For as long as the user does not click the button, please keep the game loop running. And this loop of constantly updating frames is what's usually called the main loop of your game. So within this loop, we will write whatever happens for each frame of our game. Now in Raylib, we have a procedure called begin drawing. And let me just also say that, in the beginning I said that main is a procedure. And then I also said that procedures are essentially things that you attach a name to a block of code and then you can run it later. And these things we've been using in Raylib, init window should close, begin drawing, are also procedures but defined by Raylib. So we're using code in Raylib. So this line tells Raylib that we want to start drawing our new frame, and then we need to do something during our new frame, and for our first little program we will just clear the whole screen blue. rl.clear background rl.blue. So we're telling Raylib, please clear the whole window with this blue color. Raylib comes with a few predefined colors that you can fetch this way. And then we need to tell Raylib that I am done with my frame, please show it to the user. And then you write rl.end drawing. End drawing. There we go. So that's the whole main loop for our first tiny program. So it will just, until you click the close button up in the corner, it will constantly tell Raylib, I want to start a new frame, please make it blue, and then please show it to the user. And then it loops around. I want to start a new frame. So, it just does the same thing over and over. But we will soon add in interesting things happening here where you can control like a player character and stuff. Now, at some point, the user will click the little button up in the corner, and then this loop will stop running. And at that point, we need to close the window. So we wrote rl.close window like this. This like I said, this line only checks if you click the button. It doesn't actually close the button. It only checks if the close button on the window was clicked. But yeah, so when the loop finishes running, when this is no longer true, then it will go down here and do this. And that's our whole first little Raylib and Odin program. So we need to save this now and compile it. So let's do that. Let's save it to a new file, and you can go to either the menu here, File and Save, or you can press Ctrl S. So I will do that, and I will go to the C colon, and then I will make a new folder here. Right click somewhere, new folder. I'll make a folder called code. Go inside it, make a new folder called My First Game. And in here we will say my first game.odin. Now we click save. So now that we've written our first Odin code, we need to run it. This first time that we run it, I will do it via the command prompt in Windows, or the terminal as you might call it on Mac or Linux. But I will also at the end of this video show how you can compile directly from within Sublime Text. But let's go to and run the terminal or command prompt. So you open the Windows Start menu and you write command prompt. You press enter and you get here. And we saved our code in C colon code / my first game. So let's go there. So we write cd change directory code my first game. And from this directory, we will run the Odin compiler and tell the Odin compiler to please both compile my game, turn it from code to a program, and then also run that if the compilation succeeds. Now, I put the Odin compiler in C colon Odin folder. So I will write like this, C colon / Odin space run and then a period. Don't miss the period here. And then you press enter. And then something happens. And the window opens. It says my first game. It's a 1280 by 720 pixels wide window, and it is constantly updating with the color blue, just like we told it. And if we click the little close button in the corner, then this loop will stop running and it will close the window. It all worked. Now, something might have gone wrong for you. Maybe you mistyped something in the code. Let's say that I, instead of begin drawing, wrote begun drawing by accident, and you tried to do Odin run period. I pressed up key here to get the most recent CMD command. Then the compiler will say error, begun drawing is not declared, blah blah blah, suggesting did you mean begin drawing? So sometimes when you get an error, this is how it will look. And sometimes it will give you this kind of nice suggestion. It won't always be able to do that. But in this case, it was nice enough to give it a suggestion. So that's what's going to happen when you do a mistake. You should also note here that instead of run, you can also write build. Build does the same thing as run. It compiles the program, but then it doesn't run it. But in both cases, an executable file is outputted next to your code. And we can go look at that one just to show you what actually happens. You go to this PC, see where's the code folder that I made, code, my first game. And here you see, there's the Odin file with the code inside. Here is the exe, our runnable game. We can double click that to start it. So, we don't need to involve the Odin compiler to start our game. We are almost done here for today. Now, as a final thing, I just want to show that you can compile your program directly from within Sublime Text, so you don't have to go to the command prompt or terminal all the time. So let's set that up. The way you do that is that you go to the menu in Sublime like this, click this, and then you go to Tools, Build Systems, and then you click New Build System. And then Sublime will open this new file for you. And a build system is essentially instructions to Sublime on how to do the stuff we did in the terminal without involving the terminal. So it can build and run our program and stuff at the press of a button inside Sublime. And it's just a few lines, but we can copy from the blog post. So we have my blog post here. And at the end of the blog post, I supply the build system for both Windows and Mac and Linux. So let's take the Windows one. We can click the copy button here in the corner and paste that in. And what this file is saying that please run the Odin compiler. You see, this is just like we did in the terminal. And it tells it to run it when you run this, make sure you're actually in this directory, which is what we did in the terminal as well. We changed to this directory. And then I will show you soon what this line does. So let's just save this as my first game.sublime build. Now, Sublime gives a suggestion of which folder you should save this in. Please save it in that folder, otherwise Sublime won't find it. Also, when you save it, make sure it has .sublime build at the end, otherwise Sublime also won't find it. Save that. We can go back to our game. You can click the little menu, tools, build system, and then you should have somewhere here my first game. Now you can just press F7 and it will compile and run your game. And should you make an error, like begun drawing again, and you press F7, then it says here, begun drawing not declared by RL. It both says the errors down here, and it also says them on the line here. You can even press F4 to jump to the next error. And how this works is actually because of the file regex in here. This file regex is telling Sublime how to search through the console output in order to find errors and which line they happened on and all that. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, then please just leave a comment below. I will try to answer some questions in text, while I might save some comments that are too complicated to answer in text for my Q&A live streams. In the next episode, we will add a player character that you can control and jump around with. And if you found this video interesting and want to support me, then please consider buying my game Cat and Onion on itch or wishlist it on Steam. I have links to that below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!